Hello. Now I'm going to record Daf Pei Aleph. We start on top of Pei Aleph Mishnah. The shiurim that you're chayiv achatas of various commodities. What's the shear to be chayiv? Etzem, if it's bone, kedei lasois tarvad, enough to make a small spoon. Rav Yehuda says kedei lasois mimenu chaf, bone to make a lock out of bone. Okay, we'll talk about that. Schuch is glass, kedei ligror boy roish hakirkar, glass in order to scrape the top of a pole or stick that's used for the two sticks used for weaving. Remember the two sticks on two sides with the thread between it. So in order to sharpen or straighten this pole, sror, a pebble, a evan, or a stone, kedei lizerg ba'if, enough to throw at a bird. Rav Lezer by Yaakov Aimer kedei lizerg b'behema, enough to throw at a behema. He holds that nobody would throw a rock at a bird. You want to chase a bird, you could just say boo. So therefore it's enough to throw at a behema. By the way, it's clear that if you actually take out a stone and throw it at a bird, you would be chayiv, because you might see it with intent that that's important to you. But we're talking about the stam, a stone. Yomar says, L'meimra, do you mean to say the shiur the Rav Yehuda nafish? In the Mishnah, the Tanakama said bone in order to make a spoon. Rav Yehuda said to make a lock, and a lock is bigger. We've talked about this a few times already before. Hakaimelon, the shiur the Rabbanan nafish. Whenever the Rav Yehuda argues with the Rabbanan's shear is bigger usually, and Rav Yehuda's shear is smaller, which means he's machmer, that you're chayiv even on a smaller shear. And here Rav Yehuda's lock is larger than a small spoon. Ula says, Chape Paisachas, we're talking about the teeth of a lock, and the teeth of a lock are smaller than the spoon. Once we're talking about teeth of a lock, Tana Rabbanan, the Rabbanan taught in the Braisa, Chape Paisachas, the teeth of a lock, Tahirin are tar, because they're not a utensil, it's just the teeth of a lock. But Kivon Ba Paisachas, the moment you insert it and make it part of the lock, it's Tmeim. Because the lock of a cabinet, the lock of a cabinet is a keli, and it's a keli, it's makabel tumah. And by the way, bone is like metal, it doesn't have to have a receptacle to be makabel tumah. But if the lock belongs shalgal of a gateway, afapi shechibram badalis, ukvam b'masmorim, tahirin. But if it's a lock of a gateway, so then even if you put the teeth into the lock and even fasten the lock into the door and nailed it, it's all tar. Shekolam chuber lekarka, reu kikarka, because whatever is attached to the ground is considered part of the ground and is not mekabel tumah. We learned in the Mishnah schuch is glass kedei ligror by, in order to scrape the pole that's used for weaving. Tana, we learned in a brisa different use. Schuch is glass kedei liftzoya ba shnei nimin ka'achas, when you have two threads on the loom and you want to cut them, if the glass is big enough to cut the two threads simultaneously, that's a shear for glass. Tzror a evan, a pebble or a stone, kedei lizerg ba'if, to throw at a bird. Rav Lezer ben Yaakov said to throw at a behema. Rav Yaakov, Rav Yochanan, v'hu shemargeshes ba. It's not just a small rock to frighten the behema, it has to be a rock of the size that the behema would feel you threw it at it. V'kama shiure, what is the shear? Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Rav Lezer ben Yaakov Aimer, mishkal asara zuz, the weight of 10 zuz. Zunin ol lebei midrasha. Now we're going to start talking. In those days, they didn't have paper for a person to clean himself in the bathroom, so they would use, let's say, stones, but the stones would be pointy stones. Anyway, so Zunin ol lebei midrasha. Zunin entered the beis midrash. Amar luhu, and he asked the chachamim, Rabbaisai, avanim shal beis hakisei shiurin bekama. Because we know that stones generally are muktzah, but muktzah is an isser derabanan. The rabbanan waived the isser muktzah for kavod abriyas, for human dignity, if a person needs to handle stones in order to clean himself. So he wanted to know how many stones or how large of stones. So Amrulo, they said there are three sizes of stone. There's kazayis, ke'egois, and kebeya. First stone is the size of an olive, the second one is the size of a walnut, and the third is the size of an egg. First the person would, let's say, clean the actual opening, and then he would clean around it with a bigger stone, and then finally he would clean everything with the largest stone. Amrlu Sazuna said, V'chitur tani yachnis, when a person is going to the bathroom, he has to take a scale with him to start measuring stones or weighing stones. So Nimnu v'gamru, so they decided malaya yad. A handful of stones would be enough for a person to clean himself. It doesn't matter how many or what size, as long as it's the number of stones that you can carry in one hand. We continue and continue and continue. Now, by the way, these stones are pointy stones, because this is not arguing on the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about a round stone, and a round stone, Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov said, was to throw at an animal in order to chase it. But nobody would throw a pointy stone at an animal because you'd harm the animal. So pointy stones, the shear is what a person would use in a bathroom. Well, Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Yossi says that the shear is kezayis ke'egoz u'kebeya. As we said before, there's 3 stones of 3 different sizes. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, our Misham Aviv, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi quoted his father that it's malayad, it's a handful of stone. Taner Rabbanan, the Rabbanan taught in the Brisa, Sholosh Avanim Mekurzolos, 3 of these sharp stones, muter lahachnes lebeis hakisei. Person's allowed to take it to the bathroom with him to clean himself. Now, before I continue, Rashi says that they were makel because of human dignity on the Isser of Muktzah. But that's it, only the Isser of Muktzah. But Taisva says they were also makel on being metaltal, let's say, less than Arba Amas at a time. Rashi also agrees you can be metaltal less than Arba Amas at a time, and Taisva holds in Sukkah that you can even be metaltal at more than Arba Amas and a Carmelis. So again, according to Rashi, everybody agrees they waived the Isser Muktzah. Rashi adds that they also waived the Isser of moving it less than Arba Amas at a time, and Taisva says that they also waived the Isser of carrying in a Carmelis. We're going to get to this discussion a little bit later, but it seems that according to Taisva, the Rabbanan waived all the Rabbanans, whereas Rashi was more limited in the Rabbanas that were waived, only Muktzah and only less than Arba Amas. V'kama shiuran, what size stones? Reb Meir says ke'egois, that each one of the 3 should be the size of a walnut. Reb Yehuda says that each one can be the shear of a kibetza, the size of an egg. Amar Rav from Bar Papa, Amar Rav Chizda. Rav from Bar Papa said b'shem Rav Chizda, k'machloikis kan, kach machloikis be'esrig. The same machloikis between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda, where Reb Meir says the size of a walnut and Reb Yehuda says the size of an egg, is their machloikis in Masechta Sukkah. What is the minimal size for an esrig? Reb Meir says the size of a walnut, and Reb Yehuda says larger than that, the size of an egg. The Gemara asks, Hossa Masnisan Hocha Braisa. The machloikis between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda by esrig is a Mishnah. Here, when we're talking about the stones in the bathroom, that's a Braisa. People were more familiar with Mishnayos than Braises, so therefore you should say, just like everybody knows the machlokes Reb Meir Reb Yehuda in the Mishnah regarding esrig, so kach machlokes kan, the same machlokes is regarding the size of the stones for the bathroom. Amar Reb Yehuda avaloy loyas hapayis. Might as well, I'm going to speak it out now. So according to Rashi, the heter is only muktzah or pochas mi'arba amas. But Taisvus says they even allowed carrying in a Carmelis. No, wait, we're going to get to it later. Amar Rav Yehuda says, Avalayas hapayis. You can't use a payis to clean yourself. What is payis? Amar Reb Zeira karshine bavliyosa, clumps of earth in Bavel, because those are clumps of earth that fall apart, and that doesn't work, and therefore it's just plain muktzah because you're handling soil, earth. Amar Rav says, Osir lemashmesh b'tzror b'shabes kederach shemamashmesh b'chol. It seems that sometimes the person had difficulty going to the bathroom, so if you touch the area, it would relax the muscle and he'd be able to go to the bathroom. So Rava says you're not allowed to do that with a stone on Shabbos the way one would do it during the week. And the reason would be because you might on Shabbos you might remove hair in the area. And Taisva says that even though it's Einem Eschavim, but it's Psikreisha, it's inevitable that he's going to do that. Maskif lo Marzutra l'stakin. So Marzutra says, but if a person needs to go to the bathroom and he can't, it could endanger his health. So the Chayr, he has to do it even b'Shabbos. Mar says, you're right, doesn't mean don't do it, but do it kalach hayad. Do it with a shinui. So if normally a person holds it, let's say, with all his fingers, he should hold it maybe with 2 fingers and not use his thumb. And the heter would be that if you do it that way, either either it's no longer psikresha, it's no longer inevitable when you manipulate it like that it's going to remove hairs. So davar she'ein mischaven, unintentional, is mutter. Or since you're doing good with the shinu, it's another derabanan. So if it's a derabanan, we're mekel. B'mokam sakana, because he has to go to the bathroom. Rabbi Yana says, if a person has a regular place where he goes to the bathroom, he's allowed to take malayat, a handful of these stones, because if he doesn't use it now, he'll use it later. But in lav, but if he doesn't have a regular place for beisakisa, behechra, he should take exactly what he needs, and hechra means the average. The average is ke'egois, the size of a walnut before. Here comes an unusual halacha. We're not used to stuff like this. Meducha ktana shel b'samim. Let's say there was a small keli that was used to pound spices in it. But because it was made of stone, somebody went and used it to clean himself. Rav Sheshes says, Yesh aleha eid, if there's still any soil, any dirt on it that somebody used, mutter, you're allowed to use it for Shabbos. Because otherwise, this is a keli, even though it's a keli shemalachta l'isr, because you're not supposed to pound on Shabbos, that wouldn't be a kasha. Because a keli shemalachta l'isr l'tzarech gufa, if you need it for its own use, you're allowed to be metaltal it. But this used to be a keli which was muktzamach maschsar kiss. It was a valuable keli that people really didn't use for anything else. So if somebody happened to use it in order to clean himself, and there's any indication of it that's left on it, you can use it. It's not muktzah. The Gemara is wondering, Meisvei, the Gemara asks Akasha, Sar Dvorim, Levinus Odom Lidei Tachtanios. There's 10 things that can bring a person to hemorrhoids. Be'eluhein Hoechel Alei Konim, somebody eats the leaves of the reeds, Alei Kfanim, the leaves of vines, Lulvei Kfanim, the shoots of vines, Marige Behema, meat of an animal that has ridges in it, Shidrei Shal Dog, spine of a fish, Dog Maliach Shalei Bishul Kol Tzarchai, a salted fish that's not properly cooked, Shoyse Shimrei Yain, drinking sediment of wine, and Mekaneach, Besidiv Acharsis, one who cleans himself using, let's say, lime or crushed brick, or using a stone that somebody else had used. Some say, somebody who, when he's going to the bathroom, doesn't have a seat, so he suspends himself squatting, so that can cause hemorrhoids because the muscle gets pressured. But you see that you're not supposed to use a stone that somebody else had used. So how can you use this this stone utensil that still has a mark on it from somebody else? So the Gemara gives different answers, like kasha, balacha, biyovish. If the residue that somebody else left is still moist, so you shouldn't use it. But if it's dry, it doesn't matter. If somebody used it, but he only used one side, you can use the other side. But if both sides are soiled, you shouldn't use it. The danger is if you use something that somebody else had used. Here, he himself had used it before. Anyway, what happens if it rained and the soil of the previous usage has now been washed off? So the chayr now, maybe it's again a utensil used for b'samim. So it should be muktzah. But if there's any indication that's left, even though it got washed off a lot, but if there's any indication left, then it's not going to be used for psalmim, and therefore you can use it because it lost its designation as a keli she'etz muktzamach b'schsarim kis. Rabbi Rav Shila asked Rav Chizda, Ma'al aloisam achrov legag. Are you allowed to take these stones and put them up on the roof, bring them up on the roof, or is that too much tircha to carry the stones up to the roof? For human dignity, the man has to go up to the roof, so therefore it's daich even a loisa say. By the way, a loisa say does not mean a deraisa. The Gemara in Brochas explains that every derabanan is really a loisa say, that the Torah says you must listen to the rabbanan loisasur nikol asher yerucha. So you're obligated ben Torah to listen to a derabanan. But what happens if the Rabbanan are waiving their derabanan because of human dignity? So then the Torah says that if the Rabbanan are waiving it for human dignity, then I waive my deraisa as well. That's what it means, that human dignity overrides the deraisa, because the Torah says, listen to the Rabbanan. And the Rabbanan say, for human dignity, you can override our Isser. So Yosef Meremer v'kamer lo l'shmaita, Meremer was sitting and repeating this, that you can take the stones up to the roof. Eis v'Ravina l'Meremer, Ravina asked Meremer Akasha from a Braisa and Mesechtes Beya. If a person can take a splinter of wood on Shabbos and use it as a toothpick because he has discomfort, he has something between his teeth. The Chacham say lo yitar ela min ha'eves shel behema. You can only take out of the feed box of an animal, because the feed box of an animal was not muktzah, it was muchan, it was prepared for the animal to eat from on Shabbos. So therefore you're taking a thing that's not muktzah. But to take stam a splinter is muktzah. Why is it muktzah? Isn't it covered abrias? Was hachiashta, there's no comparison. Hasam adam kaveh le'mokim lesuda. Hacha adam kaveh mokim lebeis hakisei. When a person knows that he's going to eat a meal, he should prepare his toothpicks in advance. So all the Chachamim were willing to waive a muktzah for kavod abriyas, but not where you should have prepared. So therefore the Chachamim say you can't take a muktzah piece of wood and use it as a toothpick. On the other hand, here the person doesn't know where he's going to have to go to the bathroom. So if he doesn't know, so therefore he can take stones, which are normally muktzah, and use them because for human dignity they were mekel, and you can even take them up on the roof. I'm going to upload this, and the next piece we'll discuss this topic in detail.